Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. We are pleased to welcome you to this data collection webinar series, which is organized by the Data Collection Unit at UNICEF headquarters. I'm Attila Hancıoğlu. I'm the chief of the Data Collection Unit in UNICEF headquarters. This series, as you may know, covers topics that have recently gained relevance, importance, and where there's ongoing methodological work on how best to collect data. And today, our webinar is entitled Validation of Mix Plus Substitution Methodology. Please note that this will be the last webinar before we take a few months break. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. We have scheduled about an hour and 30 minutes, including Q&A. As always, throughout the webinar, please remain muted, but kindly write your questions in the chat box, and we will try and group your questions and direct them to the presenter during the Q&A. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our UNICEF SharePoint site, together with the past webinars. We will also post recordings onto the Mix YouTube channel, and so the webinar will be publicly available. You can find the links to both of these in the email that you received. As I mentioned earlier, today's webinar is entitled Validation of Mix Plus Substitution Methodology. And we are very happy to have with us Tatjana Karaulac, who is a statistics and monitoring specialist in the data and analytics section of UNICEF headquarters. And let me now hand over to Tatjana to start the presentation. Tatjana, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Attila. Hello, colleagues. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. I see many familiar names and faces. Good to have you with us. So give me just a second to share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see it.
Yes, it's well seen. Yes.
Thank you, Attila. So today, we are here to discuss some findings about Mix Plus and to show you and to present you some work that we did related to validation of our methodology that we are using in Mix Plus surveys. First, I will say a few words about survey methodology as a reminder to all of us what we are doing, and then we will go further on tasks and analysis that we did in our work. So when we are talking about mixed survey implementation, first we have mix as our sampling frame. Basically, we finish a mixed survey and we analyze all interviewed mixed households who gave a consent and the phone number. And this is our sample frame. Once when mix is finished and data finalized, data sets ready, final, we select representative subsample from our mix, or as in this case, present our sample frame. The next step is to establish a call center, a data management system. Basically, if you all remember, it's very simple. We have two subsystems, central office and interviewers. And in short, it's very, it doesn't require some additional infrastructure. We can use, it's very flexible, we can use whatever is available in the NSO. Once when we establish a call center, we have our subsample, we place first wave of direct calls, and we start with the data entry. We are using CATI application, which is based on CS Pro, similar as in Mix. And data transferred directly to cloud and captured by our data management system. Usually the duration of calls is about 3 weeks in average. For the first wave of data collection is a little bit longer as expected. Once when we finished our data collection, we analyze the data and we select all households that we could not be able to reach. and we substitute them. Today, we will talk more about the substitution, how we are doing it, and what are the results. Once when we substitute, when we select the substitute households, we place calls to them, and we complete our first wave of the data collection. After that, we have our, how we call it, effective mixed plus sample. So those are households that we will continue calling in next waves of the data collection. So basically, those are originally selected households and those who are substituted in our process of implementation. Once when we finished with all calls, we analyze data using SPSS, we tabulate them, and we prepare different dissemination materials. We present data through snapshots and through dashboards. So this is, in very short, mixed plus implementation. Once when first wave is finished and data are analyzed, then we continue with placing calls to the same households on monthly or bi-monthly basis. We basically repeat fourth and fifth stage of mixed implementation. We place direct calls, we analyze data. Again, we repeat it in third wave, in fourth wave, and so on for a period of 12 months. How we can use mixed plus data, just to remind ourselves again, we can generate cross-sectional data. We are aiming to generate longitudinal data because, again, we are placing calls to the same households during the whole survey implementation. We can collect data on specific program indicators, which we really worked well in countries that we are implementing mixed plus survey, for opinion polling, for crisis monitoring once when the whole system is established, and for testing new topics or questions. One fact which is really important is that sometimes it can be confusing because of the title of our program and the survey. We are collecting data on mixed and non-mixed topics. We definitely benefit using the mixed already tested questions and established methodology, but we also use many other questionnaires and topics that are not mixed topics. Questionnaire content in each wave can be changed. As I already mentioned, we can generate cross-sectional data, opinion polling data, crisis monitoring, but this is something that we not recommend to change the questionnaire content each wave because it's very time consuming. In that case, we need to change questionnaires each wave. We need to customize our CATI application. We need to prepare data findings dissemination materials from scratch. So it can be quite time consuming. Until now, we fully completed 2 nationally representative surveys in Georgia and Mongolia. We have 4 ongoing surveys who are currently in some stage of the data collection, Mongolia, Samoa, Nigeria, and Jamaica. And we started planning activities in 5 more countries. You have them listed on the screen, and hopefully they will start with the data collection by the end of this year. Now we have collection of phone numbers and consent from interviewed household and mixed as a module in our base mixed questionnaires, which will basically allow implementation of mixed plus survey in many countries. And we expect to have many more coming in the next year. I just want to emphasize here that we are really taking into account many ethical considerations. We really need to collect consent for our survey to be able to collect phone numbers and to be able to use them for mixed plus implementation. Just one slide about results, which I think it's quite important to have in mind, that we have really high response rate. At least this was the case until now. As you can see, very rarely they are going below 80%, which is very close to 80, 78, 79. Mostly they are above 80 and even above 90%. So let's see what we did in our work. We were actually asking one question from the first when we started talking and discussing about Mix Plus, how this conditional or so-called matching substitution will work, or it's working when we implement the survey, because this method is quite rarely used in a survey. There are only few examples on usually very small scale surveys. So we really needed to see what we are getting with the data. For now, we did analysis using Georgia mixed data, and you will see later we are continue working on this topic. So the main question that we asked ourselves was, what are we producing? Let's say in mix, we had a value of indicator 58.5. And then we conduct Mix Plus. We asked the same questions, and we got indicator value 53.2. So how we can explain the difference? There are, of course, many reasons that difference can be seen. One of them is basically sampling selection, which we are controlling as we are selecting a representative subsample. And mix as itself is already representative for the country level. So this is something that is known and it's not a problem. Sampling errors are also something that is familiar. We are calculating them and we know with what we are working with. Quality of interviews. We already have established very tight quality control measures, and we are checking the data collection on daily basis by interviews. So it's easily to spot if there is an issue and we are immediately reacting. So also something that we are keeping under control. Questionnaire design effect is something that can influence the value of the indicator, because you all know if the questionnaire is not good, of course, the data quality will be bad and the indicator will not be good. Usually, in majority of the cases, we, of course, are using questionnaires that are already tested in mixed or other big household surveys. Of course, there is a part where we are testing questions or topics, and that is something that we have special measures on how to deal with. Seasonality is, of course, one of the things that can influence the indicator value, but in most of the countries, our colleagues are taking care of it. So basically, we are taking into account if any of the indicator on which we want to collect the data are seasonal or not, and then we are placing it in proper waves of the data collection related to that season. When we are talking about respondents in Mix Plus, the respondent is a knowledgeable adult household member. We are not interviewing children at this point. And we are really aiming to have somebody who is not too young or, not too old, so knowledgeable adult member of the household. So these are all factors that can influence the indicator value and cause the difference between mixed and Mix Plus, but all of them are controlled. What are the factors that we are still trying to see how we can explain them? So one of them is substitution. which you will see results of the analysis that we did. I will not talk about it now. The other one is time between mix and mix plus, because let's say we collected data in December last year, and then we are collecting first data in mix plus in December this year. So we don't know if the time difference had influence on the indicator, or is there a mode effect? Because in mixed, we are collecting data face to face. In mixed plus is over the phone. So as you all know, there are many research studies saying that, some of them saying, you know, the indicators are same, there is no difference. Some of them saying, no, they are not same. Of course, some indicators or some topics will be more influenced with mode effect, especially if they are sensitive. Some of them will not. So there is still like these three factors that we are still working on testing and analyzing on how they could influence the difference, if any difference is shown. Now I want to talk to you about a little bit about conditional substitution. As I mentioned before, we did our analysis example of Georgia. So before starting with Georgia, I wanted to, in very brief, to explain what means conditional or matching substitution in mixed plus context, what we are doing. So basically, when we complete the first stage of the data collection in the first wave, we select non-responding or out of reach households. So those are households who could not be reached for different reasons. Refusals, there is no phone number available in the sample, phone numbers are invalid, households could not be reached after repeated calls, phone numbers does not belong to the sampled households, and so on. So we select all those households. Then we analyze mixed data as our sampling frame data, and we select background characteristics available there, which are related to the survey topics. Once we selected background characteristics, we run the nearest neighbor analysis in SPSS, commonly known as KNN analysis. And this analysis is based on a Euclidean distance approach, which is basically calculating the distance between 2 points as a default in 2 or 3-dimensional geometric space. I will not go to technical details, but it's also easily adjustable to multiple domain space design. So we are using basically more than 2 or 3 background characteristics. Once we run the model, we select the substitute households and we conduct interviews to those households. And of course, calculate mixed plus weights after for non-response. So this is, in very short, our process of conditional substitution. So we applied this approach in Georgia mixed plus survey. And here you can see main sample characteristics, which is basically mixed 2018 Georgia, which we used as a sample frame. The phone coverage rate in this survey was very high, about 95%. We selected the sample, 2,118 households. When we selected the sample size, we took into account the 2 domains. Basically, we wanted a nationally representative sample, and also we used urban-rural domain. We also take into account the number of cases that, of course, under certain assumptions, that we will get in the last wave of the data collection. We had 31 of strata in mixed 2018, and for mixed plus, which were based on regions and urban-rural areas. Reporting domains for the majority of indicators in Mixed Plus was national and urban rural areas. Sample selection for Mixed Plus, we choose to select 3 households from each of 706 mixed 2018 clusters, and we will talk more about this. In total, 6 waves of the data collection were implemented in the period 2020-2021, and response rate in the survey was between 81 and 87%. So these are characteristic of main sample, actually our sample for Georgia Mixed Plus. When we talk about substitution, we did it only in wave 1 in Georgia because the response rates were very high and there was no need to repeat this process. Number of variables or background characteristics used for substitution were 19, and number of households substituted was 734, which was basically 35% of the total selected sample in Georgia Mixed Plus. And this is the process. So out of total sample size, 734 households could not be interviewed. Again, for reasons I already mentioned, a lot of them was caused by a long time period in between Mixed Georgia and Mixed Plus, which was 2 years. So many of the phone numbers were invalid. The others, few of them, of course, refused, and so on. We calculated the model using Euclidean distance and selected households with minimum distance to non-interviewed households. I need to note that the substitution process was performed for each cluster, which means, as if you remember, I just mentioned that we selected 3 households from each cluster, and then substitution process was following the same procedures. So we selected substitute household also from the cluster from which the original household was selected. And this is just one finding from our substitution procedure. If you remember, I mentioned that we are basically calculating distance in between 2 households in simple words, and then trying to match them with these 19 characteristics. So there is no threshold for the distance value, you know, saying like if distance is more than 10, then it's not good. Let me try to just explain in simple words of how this is working. So the distance is basically showing on how many characteristics or how many categories under characteristics the households are different. And you can see these distance values are very, very low, which is really good. The perfect situation is when you have 0, which means that the households are same in all characteristics that we were using in our model, and of course, all categories under those characteristics. You will see the list of the background characteristics that we were using in the model for Georgia Mixed Plus substitution. I need to note that for the last few households, model could not find the substitutes in first attempt. So basically, we were using a less number of characteristics for some of them. 3 of households, for 3 of households, we could not find matching, so we randomly selected them after the substitution process was finished. These are response rates in Georgia Mixed Plus. As you can see, before substitution, our response rate was 65%. And then after substitution, it's increased in 87, and it was quite constant and high during the whole period of the MixPlus implementation in all waves of the data collection. For result codes, I want to say that you can see them on the screen. I will not read them. On your left side, you have them all listed, and the italic ones are basically result codes of the households that we were substituted. Refused, no eligible respondent, phone number does not belong to the sample households, and so on. The last category, not called in the current wave, is the category that we had after the third wave of the data collection. As I mentioned, we are really investing a lot in implementing our ethical guidance and rules. And we introduced in the third wave of the data collection a rule where we are saying that the households which refused twice in consequent waves to be interviewed, we will not call them again. So this categories is for that households. If they said twice no, then we are keeping them still in our sample, but we are not calling them. Main elements of non-response in Georgia MixPlus were no response after repeated call attempts, inactive phone numbers, refusals, and this last category that I just explained. On this slide, you have result codes for all waves of the data collection. So I will not go through it. It's quite packed and a lot of numbers. So please, once when you have time, if you are interested, it will be shared with you and you can have a quick look. For the first wave of the data collection, I just marked the categories that were basically we were using as an effective mixed sample. So households that we continue calling in waves 2 to 6. And now we are coming to our main question today, the question that we are asked ourselves: does conditional substitution actually work? Does we are getting good enough estimate so we can have a quite high confidence in the data that we are getting from MixPlus? To be able to answer this question, the main analysis that we did was based on two things. First, we basically divided this in asking how good are our estimates compared to the sample frame at the indicator level. So if we are asking the same questions like in mix, are our estimates good as estimates from mix? So we carried a simulation study and we compared different approaches which are dealing with non-response. And I will talk today about that. And then once when we simulated this, we ran the one sample t-test for all indicators to see if our estimates from MixPlus sample are different from the estimates from mix, which we are calling for purposes of this analysis true value. This is one part, and the second part is basically to see how good we are in selecting the substitute households, how similar are original and substitute households also at the indicator level. So we selected unweighted indicators and we are calculated them and then compared those indicators for original and substitute household. We also performed independent sample t-test to check how significant the difference is between those two approaches. Those two groups of households. So let's see what were our steps and our results. We took the Georgia mix 2018 data. We calculated, we already actually have the findings from the survey. So we have estimates of key indicators. Then we selected a mix plus sample and calculated indicators, key indicators for mix plus sample. Please note that both estimates were done using mix 2018 data. So basically we simulated how would the indicator values be just for mix plus sample. And then we compared them. So the question was, are they same or not? To make sure, actually to test if our approach is good enough or our results are really good, we tested three approaches. One is, of course, conditional substitution with the Euclidean distance analysis. We're using weight, of course, with adding weight adjustment for non-response. The second one is just using non-response weight adjustment, which is basically what we are doing in mix. So we were using mixed approach without substitution. And these non-response adjustments was done taking into account urban-rural disaggregation. And the third option that we tested is value of the indicators and difference compared to mixed using propensity scores approach. So I will mention it briefly. We use the logistic model, which we're using the same set of variables as we used for the conditional substitution. This is for the purposes of comparison. And mixed plus weights were adjusted with propensity correction factor. This table is showing, in summary, the three different approaches that we tested with number of households in the sample and showing what was happening with weight. As you will notice, in mix plus conditional substitution, the approach that we are using, of course, the number of households was higher because we increased it by using the substitution process. Non-response weight adjustments, which is second option and third on the screen, were again households before substitution with non-response adjustment, as I mentioned, mix approach. And then the last one, propensity score adjustment, again, households before substitution using propensity correction factor for weight. Results that we got, you can see on the screen. For these, we are showing now just 12 indicators. We ran this analysis for many more, but we selected just a few for the purposes of this presentation. For each of the indicators, you can see the black line and two dotted black lines. This is the black line, full line is the mixed indicator value, true value of the indicator, and then dotted lines are presenting the confidence intervals for that estimate. Blue, orange, and black are actually the indicators value from mixed sample with their confidence interval. The blue one is conditional substitution approach. Orange one is mixed non-response adjustment approach, and the black one is propensity scores. You all know, and I'm just reminding all of us that when we look analysis like this, what we really want to see is that our confidence intervals are overlapping, which means giving us a first idea if there is a statistically significant difference in between two indicators that we are comparing. And then, of course, we want to see that our point estimate, as very close to original or true value of the indicator. As you can see, all three tested options or approaches, for all three of them, the indicator values are basically inside of the or overlapping with mixed indicator value confidence intervals, which is really good, which means that all three approaches basically are giving, at least in this case, a good enough estimate. Where is the difference? So we, for mixed plus conditional substitution approach, the confidence intervals are more narrow, which we really want to see, and it's expected because we have a slightly bigger sample size. And one of the, at least, main points for me was that for some, and mainly child-related indicators, in cases when we have low prevalence or low number of cases, the conditional substitution approach is giving us estimates that are more close to original or true value, which we were getting from Mix Plus. I'm showing here, for just as an example, child marriage indicator and overweight prevalence. And as you can see, the blue dot is very close to original or true value of these indicators from mixed survey compared to other approaches. So this is the first thing that we did. We compared this and we were quite happy with the results. And the second part that we checked is basically, we were testing using t-test, is there a significant difference in indicator estimate? To be able to see results of this test, so what we want to see on these charts is that the 0 is inside the confidence interval for the indicator. This is 1, and again, we want these dots to be as close as possible to 0. Similar as in previous chart, you can see that all indicators are same as the indicators coming from indicator value coming from mixed, and for majority of them, conditional substitution approach is very close to the origin, to the 0, basically. So not much different from the original or true value of the indicator. One more thing that we checked is coefficient of variation. So we are presenting here values for all indicators, all 12 indicators, and for all options that we tested. We took here as a threshold 15% of value. You know, there is no scientifically established threshold. It's a rule of thumb. And usually commonly accepted rule is that we have, if it's below 10%, the value of coefficient of variation, it's excellent, really good. 10 to 20 good, 20 to 30 acceptable, and over 30 usually not acceptable. Some of the of course, we need to take into account that this coefficient is usually lower for indicators with very high values, and it's higher for indicators with low prevalence or low number of cases. The red one, I marked those which are over our threshold of 15%. As you can see, they are same in different approaches for the same indicators. But again, for mixed plus conditional substitution, they have the lowest value compared to other two approaches, to non-response adjustment approach and propensity scores approach. Second part of this analysis was basically to compare just original households that were substituted, 734 of them, with substitute households. We did this on unweighted data, and we did the same comparison like for the indicator value for the whole mix plus sample. So we took 12 indicators, we calculated them using mixed data, and we compared them. I'm not showing now the indicator value and their confidence intervals because it's giving them the same picture. I'm just showing the test results, the test results. As you can see, blue is substitute households, and zero or black full line is showing original value. So basically, as you can see, the values are really close except for one indicator, which is safety for women. But all of them, zero is inside the confidence interval for the indicators. So this was the first part of the analysis that we did, and again, we are quite happy with the results. We are continue working on the analysis, and we are expecting soon to publish a paper where you will be able to see the details of the analysis, how we did it, and some more details about the result. If you will remember, I mentioned that we selected the substitutes on the cluster level. So the sample for Mix Plus was selected 3 households from each cluster, and then the substitution process used the same, if I can say, rules. But then we were thinking if, in some countries, this would not probably be possible because not in all households, not in all clusters, we will have opportunity to select a substitute households for different reasons. One of the reasons can be maybe we interviewed 5 households in that cluster, and 3 of them gave us a consent, 2 of them not. So we will select them, but then we will not be able to reach them because we don't have a consent or phone number. So the substitution will not be possible. And we wanted to test, can we implement this conditional substitution differently? So what we did, we again carried out simulation on mixed data to see what would happen if we select the substitute households from the stratum, not from the cluster, or even within the total sample. We also tested some other options, which I will not show here because they didn't perform well. And then we calculated the value of the indicators using different approaches, and we performed one sample t-test to compare the estimates from different options. Again, if they are significantly differ or not compared to true value of mixed result. So here is brief on what we did. We have mixed results. We have mixed plus results with selection from the same cluster. Other possible options. So we selected within total sample. So our pool of households for substitution was whatever was left after our mixed plus subsample selection. And then, again, as I mentioned, from the same stratum. These are the results. So the blue is within the cluster selection, orange within stratum selection, and green within total selection. All 3 worked well, with a note that within cluster seems to be giving the best results. The next best option is within stratum and then within total. So for some of the countries that are implementing a mixed survey now, we will use option within stratum because again, it's proved to be there were no enough interviewed households in each cluster to be selected for substitute households. And at the end, just to summarize our results, for our estimate, compared to the sample frame at indicator level and compared with other approaches, we have narrower confidence intervals. We have more precise point estimates for indicators with low prevalence or low number of cases, which is proved to be very valuable. If you remember, the child marriage indicator is, I'm taking it as an example because it's quite interesting for me. It's not the same if you go to policymakers and you say that this indicator is 15 or 13, and then we are getting, for some approaches, value of 20 or above. We have lower coefficient of variation, again, especially for child indicators when the number of cases is low. And we were able to prove or to show that estimate values of indicators are not significantly different from the indicators coming from sample frame, basically indicator true value, including households without phone or consent. So if I didn't mention it earlier, I apologize, and if I'm repeating, I hope you don't mind. When we select our sample, and same apply for substitute household, we don't take into account if the households have a phone or not. So we are selecting from all interviewed households. Of course, households without phone, we will not be able to call them, but they are still selected because we don't want to disturb our probabilities for sample selection. When we compare the original and substitute households at the indicator level, we also show that they are not significantly different. And then for ways of how we are doing it, just to repeat, substitution with the same cluster is the most preferred option, but next, the best one is within the stratum. So what we are doing now and what we are planning to do, we are now testing substitution in waves 2 and later. So we want to see for countries where response rates after wave 1 can start dropping, on how would it be effective to do the substitution one more time or even more. In some countries, they provided incentives for the households, so we need to see how this works. There are many factors that can influence, if incentives works well or not. So now we are analyzing that part. We will repeat validation analysis, which I presented today for low coverage and high non-response settings. We already have countries like Jamaica where basically the mixed interviewed households response rate was really high, but then the consent for Mix Plus was quite relatively low. So we will repeat this analysis for countries like Jamaica. As I mentioned before, we interview only one household member, and any adult household member living in the household. So basically, whoever picks the phone and give a consent to be interviewed. What we want to do is to target eligible individuals, in essence, to mimic mix, because some of the indicators that are of interest for us, many of the child-related indicators or woman-related indicators, we really need to talk to a woman or a mother of the child to make sure that we are getting the best data that we can. And one of the planned activities is to find the suitable countries to assess factors other than substitution effect, which we already analyzed and we will continue doing so. So now we really want to implement the survey very fast after the mixed survey is completed. This is one, to basically eliminate this time factor, and then to analyze the mode effect if possible. And I was asked by Tatjana to put some reference and some further reading links, so you can find the links here. There is a link to a paper from our colleague from Michigan University, Rafael Nishimura, who worked with us and still working with us on these substitution procedures in Mix Plus. I think you will find it very interesting. That's it. Hopefully I didn't took too much time and we have time for questions and answers. And you are still there.
Thank you very much, Tatjana. We are 4 minutes to the hour. This is good timing. We have some time for Q&A. Thank you very much for the presentation once again. Let me go to the chat box, and there are already 2 questions. Let me read the first one to you. You
Sure.
implied some responses in some way to both questions, but still, let's go through them. Does Mix Plus control for mobile phone penetration, because it is not 100% in many cases, and moreover, not every Mix participant or household own a mobile phone or landline, is the first question. And the second question may be, this is sort of related, and let me mention that too. Does phone coverage refer to mobile phone penetration, or what is the difference between phone coverage and response rate?
Okay, so let me start with the first one. We don't control in sense that we are selecting just households with phone numbers. Okay, as I mentioned, we are taking all households interviewed and mixed, and we are selecting our self-sample, not taking into account if they have phone or consent or not. So yes, that's why we did this this whole analysis, because we are well aware there are households without phone numbers, or some, even if they have phone numbers, they will refuse or we will not be able to reach them. So that's why we did this analysis to see with this whole substitution process, are we managing to basically to present them as they were interviewed in our survey. So how good we are with representing those households that we could not reach. This is one thing, and as you could see on the slide, we showed that even for the house, which was quite high percent in Georgia, with 35% of the households we were not be able to reach in first attempt. So it's not like we are talking about 5% or below. So we showed that our substitution procedure worked, and basically that whatever our findings are representing are similar, or sorry, are same as the true value of the indicators from mixed. And statistically, there is no difference. Even if we put aside the statistical significance in between differences, you could see that for the majority of the indicators, the values from Mix Plus were very, very similar. Estimate points were very, very similar to the original values of the indicators. For the second one, phone coverage that we showed, 95% for Georgia survey, was basically the percentage of households in mix with a phone number provided for us to call them in mix plus. So it's not the phone penetration in the whole country, it's just the coverage in mix. And the part one, I'm now looking at what is the difference between phone coverage and response rate. Yeah, the phone coverage is basically the number of households in mix who provided phone numbers. So this was our mix was our sample frame, and response rate is basically the number of households who responded to us in mix plus. So the response rates that we shown are related to mix plus. I hope I answered the questions. Please, Attila and colleagues, jump in if I misunderstood something.
No, it's I can see that you answered the question well. It is clear.
Good.
I don't see another question, but let me ask a question then. Are there any cases where you might be using both substitution and propensity score adjustments? I'm thinking of situations when the phone coverage is low or consent is low, and therefore you are starting from a very a much lower number than your intended sample size, and you might also have attrition higher than other countries. In such situations, would you consider using substitution plus propensity scores?
Yeah, thank you, Attila, for the question. This is one of the options or approaches that we are considering, and we will be testing it in. I mentioned Jamaica. I think Jacqueline is here with us. Hello, Jacqueline. She's our colleague working with us in Jamaica Mix Plus. So Jamaica is one of that cases. We have there, compared, of course, to Georgia and even in Mongolia, we have quite low consent rate. So this, of course, we expect that our response rate would be significantly lower compared to other countries. So this is one, and yes, substitution options are quite limited there. So this is one of the options that we will be probably testing there to see how good these options will be, and then, yeah, to continue with there. There are really a lot of challenges, as many colleagues know, for countries where there's no confidence, they will not give a consent, or even if they say yes, there is the penetration of phone network is low, so low coverage in the country in general. So yeah, these are some of the options that we are taking into account and will be tested before we go with implementing them.
Thanks, Tatjana. I don't see any other questions. I'm asking colleagues to write if they have any other questions in the chat box. Yes, one more has come from Bo. Apologies if you have already mentioned, but perhaps it would be good to hear your opinion on whether there is a threshold, that you don't want to be below in terms of recorded phone coverage and consent before starting a Mix Plus.
Yeah, thank you, Bo, for the question. Always coming difficult questions from Bo. Honestly, we don't have a threshold, at least for now. We still didn't have any extreme cases in the countries. I think our lowest consent rate in mix was close to 60, which is still not too bad. Of course, it can be much, much better. But yeah, we still didn't get to this point. Of course, we will not do the survey in countries where this is like 10, 15, or 20%. There is no point. But yeah, we don't have this threshold, which when we say, okay, below this, we will not go.
Is there something that could be maybe simulated also?
Yeah, maybe we can try with the simulation. definitely we have this is the value of the whole idea, to have mixed as a sample frame, because we have really rich data there, so we can do a different simulation, and we can see maybe, yeah, we can definitely go and see if there is possibility to maybe not to say, okay, this is exact number is the threshold, but it's at least to give us a range of the coverage or consent under which we should not implement the survey. Yeah, a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatjana. I don't see any other questions in the chat box, so we come to the end of our webinar. We can finish early today. Sometimes we finish much earlier than an hour and a half. This seems to be one of those days. Your presentation was very clear. I'm suspecting that's why we don't have many questions. But thank you very much once again for this presentation, for all the details that you provided, methodological details of the MixPlus2. So thank you very much to all everyone who participated today. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be on the SharePoint site of UNICEF as well as on the Mix YouTube channel. So please spread the word. If there are other colleagues who are not able to participate today and would like to know more about MixPlus, then they can watch this video as well as the videos of the past webinars through those links. And again, as I mentioned before, this is our last webinar in this current series of webinars. We are going to take a few months break. Probably we're going to come back at the beginning of the fourth quarter in October or thereabouts. Most of the credit for the organization of these webinars goes to Tatjana, my partner in crime in these webinar series. So I would like to say thank you to Tatjana for all the efforts, for all the work that has gone into organizing these webinars. And I say goodbye to everyone for the time being, and see you all in October or thereabouts. Tatjana.
Thanks, Attila, for the kind words, and thank you, Tatjana, for a great presentation. All the credit goes to our presenters who to give their time and effort. So thank you all, and we'll see you in a few months. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye-bye.